I am beginning a sermon series on John chapter 14. For 4 weeks, we will reside deeply in this chapter, a most amazing chapter. The English word way, which appears 3 times in this chapter, in the Old Testament, that word way simply means a path or a road. But even in the Old Testament, it then begins to take on a more figurative meaning. It means, what road are you on? Are you on a good road? What manner of living? What is your way? And then by the New Testament, that English word way becomes fully associated with Jesus Christ himself. That somehow he embodies this quality of existence, this way of living fully. And it's in John 14 that Thomas says, "How can we know the way?" And Jesus says, "I am the way," this way of love and hope. And then at the end of the chapter, he says, "Rise, let's be on our way." And then in the Acts of the Apostles, towards the end of the Bible, the first followers of Jesus are called the followers of the way. This is before there was the word Christian. Followers of the way. And so for this sermon series, I'm calling it People of the Way. For so many of us, it can feel like we're half living, sort of swimming in chronic blahs. But Jesus offers a fullness or vibrancy of life. That is the way. A friend of mine has a friend who has a 4-year-old and a newborn baby. And this friend told my friend that she walked into the baby's room and saw her 4-year-old peering into the crib. And the 4-year-old was saying, "Tell me about God. I think I'm forgetting." And that line seems so resonant to us because we have this natural sense that a baby has just emerged from the mystery, has just been so close to God. And we all have this sense that as we begin to live our lives and take on a more rational approach to life, we can lose a sense of enchantment, that we still swim in that closeness to God. Tell me about God. I think I'm forgetting. An amazing line. In fact, it struck me as so amazing, I decided to Google it. Because, when you hear something from a friend of a friend, and once it's twice removed, so I Googled it. Turns out it is an urban legend that people say a lot. Some toddler saying to a baby, "Tell me about God, I think I'm forgetting." So it may be a legend, but it's a good one, isn't it? Tell me about God, I think I'm forgetting. I think it's difficult for us now to enter into spiritual thoughts and language. I think it's harder for us. We live in such a rational, instrumentally oriented culture. I think listening to spiritual language is more difficult to us. And John chapter 14 is this lavish, elevated form of spiritual speaking. And I think it can be hard for us to follow him here. You see, in the Gospel of John, Jesus begins to speak very metaphysically. In the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, he speaks in more Spartan, direct ways. But in the Gospel of John, his language becomes rarefied, and it's hard for us to hear. It was hard for them in the Gospel. There's sort of this shtick in the Gospel of John that Jesus will say something metaphysical, and then the people around him take him to literally or concretely. So like in chapter 3, he says to Nicodemus, "You must be born again." And Nicodemus says, "Well, how do I get back into my mom's womb and get born again?" He says something spiritual, and people miss the resonance completely. In John chapter 4, he's with the woman at the well, and he says, I will give you living water. And she says, "How will you do that? You don't have a bucket for the well." He's speaking in such elevated ways, people goes right over their head. In John chapter 6, he says, "I am the bread from heaven." And they say, "We can't eat your flesh, can we?" They take him literally, right over their head. And this could happen in John 14, because now this begins the farewell discourses in the gospel. This will go on for chapters, that he's speaking in these metaphysical, spiritual ways, and it's hard for us to hear that now because of our modern lives. There is a German sociologist that is explaining exactly why it's hard for us to hear spiritual things anymore. He claims, as a sociologist, that we have been formed by our society. And so for the last 300 years in modern Western culture, we have been shaped in a particular way that makes us very difficult to enter into this spiritual language. He claims that in a modern culture, the emphasis is on gaining more knowledge. A modern culture has basic strivings. It wants to know more, and then it wants to put that knowledge to good use to extend its reach and to control the world. In this new book called The Uncontrollability of the World, Hartmut Rosa says, you have been shaped in a particular way now, and it's based in our society of those strivings of science, technology, economics, and politics. Get more knowledge, and then exert administrative control over your world. But then, because a society like ours is never really satisfied, it has to keep innovating and growing to achieve what he calls a dynamic stability. And in this seeking a dynamic stability, always innovating, always changing, you are experiencing what he calls social acceleration. Everything is sped up. If you have a slight vertiginous feeling that you're dizzied by all the change and all the information and all the news, this is social acceleration. And so then, living in a society that is trying to control everything, but is accelerating faster and faster, he says that your main orientation to the world is one of aggression. He says every way you engage the world is a point of aggression. You're trying to coerce, control, and direct things. And that in the midst of social acceleration and this desire to control, you then begin to have a despairing feeling that you can never really manage all of your affairs, that life becomes this ever-growing to-do list. And our modern lives are all about optimization, and so you even begin to approach your own body aggressively. You have to optimize, you have to lower your blood pressure, you have to lose weight, you have to do this better and better in seeking to control and optimize and having an aggressive stance to the world. He says we lose something. We lose the most basic, vibrant quality of life, which he calls resonance. Resonance for him is when a human being is moved by something, inspired, touched. Resonance, what he means is when a human being is not seeking to control or achieve something, but is experiencing something, resonance. In John chapter 14, Jesus is trying to teach us resonance, to trust again, to experience the vibrancy of life that is your birthright. Do not let your hearts be troubled with life as an endless to-do list, seeking to always optimize and extend your reach. Every choice you make in life is an attempt to extend your reach. But receive something. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. Trust, experience. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And I will come back and take you to myself. Hear how consoling and trusting this passage is. Jesus is trying to help you experience resonance. If you ask a human being to describe in depth what was meaningful in their life, you'll begin to hear stories of resonance. You won't hear what they controlled or did. You will hear, I happened to meet so-and-so, and they became the love of my life. And then I happened to experience this, and I decided to try this. And it's these experiences that vibrate. This passage in John 14 is so deeply comforting. But this week, in my Thursday noon gathering, I hold a Thursday noon gathering every week called Spiritual Conversations, and we look at the text of the week, and we just share and explore together. Anyone is always welcome. You can just stop by Thursday at noon, commercial break, okay? And all of a sudden, while we're experiencing the beauty of this passage, someone said, "This just makes me so mad." I said, What? He said, in the midst of this beautiful passage, all of a sudden, Jesus gets exclusive. And he says, no one comes to the Father but through me. And I'm so tired of religions thinking they're the one true path. And all of a sudden, Jesus says, no one comes to the Father but through me. And it just frustrates me. And we began to discuss together that in fact, that way we read this passage is wildly off. It's sort of an American interpretation of this passage for the last couple hundred years to think that Jesus is talking about organized religion in John 14. Then when he says, no one comes to the Father but through me, you better be Christian or you're lost. Where do we get that he's talking about organized religion here at all? We simply impose it upon the text and then take it as these kind of words of terror, really. You better be in the right religion. If Jesus was talking about organized religion, there was no Christianity yet. He must be talking about Judaism. So if you think this passage is talking about organized religion, he's saying there's no way to the Father but through Judaism. But I don't hear people say that. It's a strange misreading of the passage to think he's talking about the organized Christian religion is the only path to God. No. He's looking at Thomas and saying, this love that I incarnate, this love that I am fully manifesting, this love and this hope and this peace, that is the way to God. You can't get to God through hate or violence or greed. There is only one way to God, through love. And there's lots of religions, thank be to God, that express love. A lot. But do you see what we do? In our efforts to manage things and then deploy them for our purposes, this is how we start to approach religion. Christianity isn't something to resonate with and be inspired by and drawn to. No, Christianity becomes something I want to manage. I want to deploy it to achieve my ends. I want to go there, not there, so I'm going to do this. that is to take all the resonance out of our faith. That you are being invited into a relationship with the world, with your brothers and sisters, with God, that vibrates, inspires. But we turn religion into something to control and use. Tell me about God, I think I'm forgetting. Living in this culture of endless to-do lists, I think I'm forgetting. Believing I have to optimize every opportunity to extend my reach, I stop living simply in the moment and resonating. Tell me about God, I think I'm forgetting. Well, Jesus tells us about God.